right, I didn't have you. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Sports Philadelphia Porch.
Welcome.
We are live. Yes, we are. We are live all over the world. We are live on Facebook. We are live on LinkedIn. We are live on YouTube. We are live on X. And right after this show, we are going to drop it into the podcast. Woo! Where can you get that podcast, Schwaber?
You can get that podcast anywhere you get your friggin' podcasts.
The iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or yes, anywhere you get your friggin' podcast. So welcome to the show. Thanks for being here, guys. I don't know, man. It seems like it's starting to become a tumultuous year in Philly sports. All of a sudden, I mean, last year it was like the Eagles could do no wrong, and the Sixers, they had a shot, and of course the Flyers were in the dumpster, but the Phillies made it long in the playoffs, and now all of a sudden it's like things are falling apart here. They're falling apart, Schwab. What are we going to do?
Well, they're falling apart a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, what are we going to do? I mean, we can't sit around and cry about it. I guess not. We just got to, realize that, we're pretty lucky. We're pretty blessed. I mean, look, in the last calendar year, or go back 2 calendar years, you had a football team in the Super Bowl. You had a baseball team in the World Series and in the NLCS. Look, it's very few teams get that far.
That's right.
So you can't be that upset about it.
Yeah,
now,
that's right.
Now, look, this is nothing new, the Joel Embiid injury.
Yeah.
Right. But,
absolutely.
But at the same time, like, who even knows? Like, maybe it's actually a silver lining.
So are you telling me we're just flipping the page right to page 1 right now, and we're going to talk 76ers basketball?
Yeah, we'll talk
absolutely.
Sixers basketball. I kind of look at this right now as like, maybe it's a blessing in disguise. Maybe he basically sits out, the majority of the rest of the year, comes back for the last 2 weeks for conditioning, and goes into the playoffs healthy.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Instead of him getting nicked up towards the end.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So who knows? And the big question is going to be, looks like he is electing for surgery.
Ooh, okay.
But what they say is, that can be on the quicker side, a 4 to 6 week recovery.
Right.
On the longer side, maybe a 6 to 8 week recovery.
Right.
Then you've got all sorts of people who are just like, why don't you just sit him out for the rest of the year and just get healthy for next year?
Yeah,
but to me, it's like, how many more years are you going to have this guy at this level? I think you basically want to get into the playoffs and get in and see if you can win.
Yeah, I agree.
So to me, I think that means you got to make a trade at the trade deadline.
Yeah, and you talked about that. I want to remind everybody that if you want to follow the Sports Porch Philadelphia, you can follow it on YouTube, the Sports Porch Philadelphia. It's easy to find. The Grant Schwabini does a lot of predicting on there and a lot of talking, and he's filling up the content. And just yesterday, actually, you did a video on the trade deadline and what they should do. And right after that, somebody on Philly Sports said they must be watching.
Same thing. They must be watching.
So
people are paying attention.
Let's talk about the trade deadline.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, so here's kind of the big spot that the Sixers find themselves in. So after this season, things become a lot easier for the Sixers to manipulate their roster.
Right.
Because they have Tobias Harris and his max contract coming off the books.
Yeah, they can dump some salary.
Okay, so they can dump some salary. They'll be one of the teams that has the most salary available.
Right.
Okay. And then beyond that, in the Harden trade, part of that trade was they got 2 first-round picks.
Very
so
good,
you can package those in a trade.
Right.
Okay. So the question is, you have to try to weigh, well, who's going to be available at the end of the season versus who's available now. Also too, with the trade deadline looming, our teams are going to try to fleece you. They're going to say, give me those 2 number 1 picks and you got a deal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I think what you got to do is, as Daryl Morey, the GM, is you got to look at it and you got to say, hey, look, I got to try to find a way where I can sort of get the best of both worlds out of this. And so my solution was, hey, let's hold on to one of those first round picks to have for next year.
Right.
And let's use one of those first round picks to maybe not trade for, the biggest superstar in the league, but somebody who's an all-star caliber scorer, like a DeJounte Murray from the Atlanta Hawks.
Right.
They're a team that's looking to completely rebuild, around, Trae Young, who's their star. So they're willing to sort of, get rid of pieces. Like, basically DeJounte Murray was a piece in another trade.
Right.
He's like, an ascending young player that's got grit, that's got size and length, that can defend, that can hit game-winning shots. He can help, if Embiid's going to be out for a month to 2 months, he can help Tyrese Maxey. So it's not all on him. That to me is the kind of guy who you want to, look for.
Yeah. And I think the bigger question here is the question that comes up all the time with an injury. So regardless of whether or not it's a 3-4 week return, 5-6 weeks, 7-8 weeks, or if there's a setback, or if, God forbid, they decide let's shut them down for the rest of the year until the playoffs, maybe. Can they win without Embiid and not making a significant addition at the trade line? Because you still have half the season to go, plus a couple games. So, I mean, you got to get there first. So can they do it without Embiid? Let's pretend for a second. Trade deadline's gone. Nothing significant has happened. Can they win without Embiid at a clip that's going to keep them on pace to be in the playoffs?
I would say yes, but I think it's, you're looking at the bottom. Now, remember, one of the things about the NBA playoffs is it used to be 1 through 8.
Yeah.
And now they've got the play-in tournament.
Right.
So you can be like 10, 11, and still
squeak in.
And squeak in, right? And in fact, one of the play-in teams last year was the Miami Heat, who reached the finals.
Right.
So, you can, I think because of the play-in, there'll be enough room to get in. Now, it's not going to be easy, right? Since Joel's been out, I believe the Sixers are 1-2, and in 2 games they got blown out, and in the one game that they won, Tyrese Maxey had to score 51 points for them to win.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's going to be tough.
Yeah, because Tyrese Maxey now is all of a sudden going to have to go from, he used to go from we got to stop Embiid and Harden to now we got to stop Embiid to now we only have to stop Maxey.
Right.
He's the guy that they put on the bulletin board and say, we got to stop this guy.
So if they would add another guy like DeJounte,
right. Somebody like that,
then you've got another wild card in there. He can score.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So it doesn't have to shoulder everything.
Is there anybody else on their radar or that you think should be on the radar to bring in?
I'm sure there are others, but, I don't think they're going to be, huge names.
Yeah.
I think the huge names tend to get moved in the off season.
Right.
There was a little bit of talk about, maybe LeBron, because
that seems very far-fetched.
Well, it's far-fetched, but the idea is that, the Lakers are going nowhere right now.
Yeah. I feel so bad for the Lakers.
Right. So it's, kind of like, could you imagine him and Maxey and Embiid, even if they get in a play-in tournament, that maybe that team could go all the way and you just go back to LA the next year, but which is kind of ridiculous in terms of how the league works.
Yeah. And I don't see, do you see LeBron? I mean, I know this is almost a ridiculous conversation, but do you see LeBron wanting to come to Philadelphia?
Well, no, because he didn't want to come before.
Right.
I mean, look, and it really has nothing to do with Philadelphia. It just has to do with wanting to live in LA like a celebrity and a superstar, and he's got a movie business and to be on the beach.
Yeah.
It's in his whole family.
I can't fault him for the whole the beach part. I definitely can't fault him for that.
Right. That's why whenever there's a big guy available. They either want to play in LA or Miami.
Right.
It's the only places anybody wants to play.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I'm sitting here thinking, if I was an NBA player, which first of all that's a pipe dream, but
it's very unlikely.
Yeah, very unlikely.
Yeah.
I'd probably where would I pick, Miami or LA? I've been to both. I like Miami. I'd take Miami. Yeah, because you're close to the Caribbean.
Right, that's true.
So you can hop over to Bimini for a little weekend, come back, play shoot a little hoops, make a couple $1 million back over to Bimini.
Hit the club, hit the
clubs, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
All the stuff that we were famous for 30 years ago.
Right, that's right. And we don't do that anymore.
Still suffering to this day.
Suffering. Yeah, still got a hangover.
Yeah. Let me tell you.
Right. But yeah, so I don't know. There's a million guys they could potentially go after and get. That's the one that just sort of stands out to me as sort of like that upper mid-level type guy that you could get. Like the one thing I don't want to do is I don't want to trade for, let's say, a superstar that comes with issues.
Yeah.
Where we got to give up 4 bench players to get them. Then you just get the superstar and then you're completely depleted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then then the question is, are you renting him for a year?
Right.
How old is Embiid? I can't remember. 27?
I think he's a little older. I think he's 29.
Okay. So, I mean,
turns 30 this year or something.
Sometimes NBA players are kind of like hockey players. They can play into their mid-30s and still be very, very effective.
Yeah. He's maybe got 5 good years left.
Okay. So it's almost like, isn't this classic? It's classic. Yeah. Philadelphia is off to a good start. It looks like the chemistry is there. You've got Maxey now, who's living up to his potential finally. Harden is gone, and he was obviously, in spite of the fact that they were a good team, he was obviously a problem.
Right.
And then and injuries are part of the game, and Embiid spends a couple weeks every year. He's down for the count. I think every player does. It's a tough physical game, and they don't wear pads. But isn't this just the Sixers' luck that he may have to be shut down for a month?
It is,
or maybe 2.
It's like
that's a quandary.
It's the curse of the process.
Yes,
it's the curse of the process. It's the basketball gods have basically said, "Thou shalt not lose on purpose and be awarded a championship."
There you go. Exactly. Exactly. What do you think? I mean, I know you've gone over all the possibilities of Embiid. The possible length of his downtime, a trade. Obviously, the Sixers are going to make a move, but what do you think they should do with Embiid? Your opinion with Embiid and the trade deadline. Do you think they should maybe kind of err on the side of caution and give him more time at the risk of not being at that top level and maybe going 500, through this period?
Yeah.
Or do you think they should try to get him back sooner rather than later? Because, I think it would be very advantageous this year if the Sixers could pull off a 1 seed.
They're not going to be able to do that.
I doubt it too. But what do you think they should do? What does the Grand Schwabini say as the de facto GM of the Sixers and coach on the Philadelphia Sports Board?
Yeah, I think what you want to do is you want to be cautious, but you don't want to be too cautious. You don't want to punt on the season and just say, let's shut them down.
Right.
We'll use all our resources in the off season.
Right.
You don't want to do that because the reality is, you never know how long the guy's going to play. I mean, what if he gets a serious injury next year or the year after?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So you never know how long he's going to play. And look, if he's not the best player in the league, he's in the top 3.
Yeah.
So, there's nobody like him. You can't trade him, so, you got to try to win it and win it now. So I think what you do is, you kind of err on the side of caution. Yeah, maybe he could come back in 4 to 6 weeks, but I say you wait the 6 to 8 weeks, and have him healed as good as can be. and have him ready, have him play a couple games before the playoffs to get his conditioning back, and just roll with that and make a trade to make the team better going into the postseason. It's going to help you maybe, stay a game or two above 500.
So you're a proponent then of the lengthier recovery period, to be safe, and kind of crossing your fingers that everybody else plays at that high level, and of course, no other injuries.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So who's a surprise team in the NBA right now for you? I'm going off script here, but
surprise team.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess, there's a few. I mean, the Minnesota Timberwolves are really good. Yeah. And I'm not really sure why. It seems like they have just like a bunch of kind of like young superstars.
Well, they're draining the shots. That's what they're doing.
Yeah, they got a bunch of young superstars.
Okay.
So you've got Minnesota, and then the other one is the Oklahoma City Thunder, which has the best record in the Western Conference.
That's who I was going for. Yeah, I think they're one of the most surprising teams.
Yeah, they've got a guy, Gilgeous-Alexander, that nobody even knows of because he plays for Oklahoma City,
and his name is Gilgeous.
Right. Yeah. But he's got 31.1 points per game. You look on the Timberwolves, you've got guys like everybody knows Karl Anthony Towns,
right?
But then you've got Anthony Edwards, who was the first overall pick from a couple of years back.
Yep.
Who's averaging 25.6 points per game. You got Rudy Gobert, who's always in the running for Defensive Player of the Year, and you got a bunch of good role players, guys that are
right,
filling the role. So I mean, those would be the surprise teams. But when it really comes down to it, is the stars are really what wins in the NBA,
right?
So those teams are going to have to really kind of prove it, in the playoffs. I mean, look, both of those teams have better records than the Denver Nuggets.
Right.
But, the Denver Nuggets got, Nikola Jokic, and they've got, Jamal Murray. So, hey, none of those teams have those two.
Yeah. Are they going to? So I guess the question is, when do they fade back to the pack?
Right. We'll see. Maybe they won't. Yeah. Maybe they won't. And, it'll be an exciting story. But, the thing about basketball these days, it's pretty wide open.
Yeah.
There's no, there's no Jordan, Pippen, Rodman, Bulls.
Yeah.
It's like,
it hasn't been that way for a long time.
No. And maybe the closest we were to it was the Golden State Warriors for a little bit.
Right.
But
it was Steph Curry.
Yeah. But they've kind of tailed back, Klay Thompson still good, but got injured.
Yeah.
Draymond Green, not as good as he used to be.
Right.
They've kind of lost some, side pieces that helped them quite a bit. So it's really open for anybody. Anybody can take it.
Who is the team in the East right now, other than the Celtics, that you would be worried about? The Sixers should be worried about.
Well, it would be the Bucks.
Yeah.
Because they have Dame and Lillard.
Right.
And although the
current champions.
Yeah.
Right, so.
Although, well, not current. They didn't win last year, but 2 years ago.
Or 2 years ago.
Yeah. Now, but the thing that's crazy about the Bucks is that they're the team that now has Doc Rivers as a head coach.
I know.
And
that's why I brought
what? The funny thing is, so what does he do? He loses his first 2 games. And then the third game they win. And then I think it's the fourth game. They got outscored like 40-8 in the fourth quarter. And
nice.
And it's kind of like,
and then they fired Doc Rivers.
right.
Why does a team make a change like that? Have we heard anything more about what the problem was?
Who
I mean,
knows?
There had to be some internal,
I'm sure there were
shit going on there that like somebody really pissed somebody off. I mean,
I'm sure there was.
How do you take a team that's in there in first place in their division? How do you take a team in first place? And I think we said this last week on the podcast where I said I liken it to back when the Redskins, is football, but the Redskins were 6-2 with Norv Turner and he got fired.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the same thing. It's like you're shaking your head. Like I still to this day don't know why that happened. So
right.
So hey,
there's
could be good.
Something behind the scenes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, but no, that's a good thing that they have Doc Rivers as head coach.
You got it. You got it.
So
he couldn't get the Sixers to the promised land.
Right.
As try as he might.
But, but right now, it's all about getting Embiid healthy and maybe getting some help for the team. And then the first part is making the playoffs.
Last question on page 1 before we move to page 2, which will be the Flyers. How are you feeling about the new coach?
The new coach
for the Sixers?
Nick Nurse.
Yeah, Nick Nurse. How are you feeling about it?
I feel real good about him.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he seems like he's always got a good plan in place. And he knows how to play to the strengths of his team. He has a system where they move the ball. So I think he brings the most out of the pieces on the team.
Obviously, he's helped Maxey.
He's helped Maxey become a superstar.
Right.
But really, he's getting a lot out of role players. You have a guy like a Nick Batum who, half the people in the world don't know who he is.
Yes.
But, the bottom line is the guy, maybe he only shoots like 7 or 8 shots a game, but, maybe 2 or 3 of them are 3-pointers and he usually makes them.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And he plays good defense and he gets critical rebounds, so he's getting a lot out of, the role players on the team. Everybody sort of understands their role and plays to it.
Okay.
Like Patrick Beverly is, kind of like the backup guard off the bench, and he's a veteran.
Right.
And you can see how he's just leading people, and, in crunch time, he's always on the floor. He's always making plays,
Right.
So, yeah, I'm real happy with Nick Nurse. I mean, we couldn't be really in a better spot than we are with him.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to page 2. Page 2 this week, of course, is
the Flyers.
The Flyers. And
Today the big news broke.
I don't want to use the term dumpster fire, but I feel like there's a potential, there's like a smoking dumpster right now, and it could turn into a fire. I mean, with all this ridiculous stuff that's going on behind the scenes that has nothing to do with hockey.
Right. Well, I think that's going a little too far. Well,
I'm trying to be dramatic for our listeners.
Yeah, I know that.
I'm trying to be controversial.
You like to be edgy.
Yes, let's be edgy.
Yes. So they actually had the Ontario police spoke today.
Yeah.
About the 2018 Canadian gold medal champion hockey team,
right?
Of which Carter Hart was your starting goaltender, and excellent player for the Philadelphia Flyers. And so he was charged with 1 count of sexual assault, along with 5 other players, NHL players.
Yeah,
one of the NHL players was charged with 2 counts. I don't know what the heck that means. But the bottom line is, look, I'd like to say, let's view these guys as innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
But we also kind of know that that's not the way the world works.
It's not.
And, and there's always going to be a part of us, even though we can say that. Now I'm willing to say that because I could see somebody wanting to take advantage of, 5 guys who are in the NHL who make a lot of money.
Yeah. I mean, that's always a
possibility.
It's a tough subject to approach.
Right.
Yep.
But I'm also going to say at the same time, what's kind of crazy about this is 6 years after it happened. Okay.
That is a long time.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
But it also makes, and again, I'm just guesstimating here, but it also makes you think if they waited that long, they must feel like they absolutely have a strong case.
You're probably right about that.
And you have to at least think that he, maybe he didn't actually do any of the assaulting, but he was at least there, and he probably had something to do with it.
Well, I don't think he would be named as part of this if there wasn't some sort of involvement. And of course, we're not making any assumptions.
Right.
But and Steve, of course, is always watching us. Thank you, Steve, member of the Pittsburgh Porch. He says at least the Flyers are getting cap space and they're not coming back. Of course, that's coming from a Penguins fan.
No, but that's the interesting thing is that I think Steve is right. I mean, probably Carter Hart is not going to play for the Flyers again.
And who's that? Who's next man up? I can't remember his name.
Sam Urson.
Now he's had a pretty good year himself.
Yeah, he's had a pretty good year.
Yeah,
but the Flyers, went on a 5-game skid. Steve says, did Tippett get injured? Yes, but he is back on Tuesday night when they resume playing.
Okay. Would you say 5-game skid?
5-game skid, and to be honest, it all started with the leave of Carter Hart.
Right.
So I do think that everybody's head was in kind of a different place.
Oh, of course.
And probably the All-Star break couldn't have come at a better time for the Flyers.
Yeah.
To kind of get everybody away from hockey for a little bit, and then come back kind of fresh and realize that he's going to be gone and kind of move forward from there.
Yeah.
So, the Flyers are sort of caught in a tricky spot, whereas right now they're in a playoff spot, but they're only about 2.5 games up on a playoff spot. Right. So you can very easily in a week be out of a playoff spot.
Yeah. I was listening to some people on sports radio talking about, the NHL and some of the surprise teams. Like the Flyers were one of them. I can't remember the other one, but what they talked about, and this was actually right before that news broke.
Mm-hmm.
And they talked about how in the NHL, a lot of these teams, they will come back to the pack.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's not that it looked like the Flyers were putting a pretty good season together. And we addressed this in previous shows where you've got a lot of number 1 picks, you've got a lot of young stars, and now they've played together for a few years. And, hockey is definitely a chemistry type of game, man. You gotta know the people you're playing with really well. Maybe they're putting it together. Carter Hart was having a great year. The backup goaltender was having a great year. Now this happens, and it kind of derails them. So you're not sure how are they going to rebound from this. I guess we'll see. And Steve chimes in here with a comment again. The Flyers were getting tired playing that Torch 200 game.
Yeah,
what is that? A 200-foot game?
Yeah, that's just not a great comment.
Yeah,
but no, I think what it comes down to is that the Flyers are sort of in this in between spot. They'd like to have a successful season, but at the same time, they can't overlook the potential to really add, young potential superstar players and draft picks to the team.
Yeah.
So there's, I would say that there's nobody on the team that's probably untouchable, but there are some that are probably more likely to go than others if they go.
Right.
And so I was listening to a Flyers guy over the weekend, and the names that he was pointing out a Scott Lawton, who's kind of like your third line center, kind of real scrappy player, manages to get 20-25 goals a year, and just plays really hard. Could certainly see him being a role player on, a championship level team.
Right.
He was a former first round pick too.
Right.
Somebody like that. But the idea is that, if you, get somebody's best prospect or somebody's number 1 pick, for the next 2 years or something, that, maybe you get somebody who's better than him. Right.
Right.
And, they were basically saying with the, with the couple trades that have gone down so far, like Lindholm and Monahan, that's what Lawton's gonna command as a first round pick.
Right.
Another guy is Morgan Frost, who I think is a really decent player. Gets caught sometimes not playing much defense, is just kind of like an offensive run and gun kind of guy, which Torch doesn't like so much. So he's a guy who's also a former first round pick that could get you something in return. I can't remember what team it was, but there's some team that's got some young defenseman who's supposed to be really good, but he's just being blocked because the team's so good.
Right.
You know what I mean? He's just being blocked. And it's like, do you unload like a Morgan Frost to get somebody like that?
Yeah.
Who jumps into your lineup and is on, is in the second line defense.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see what they end up doing. I don't think that you're going to see him trade like a Konechny or anybody like that. Just because I think that they like him and they've talked about re-upping him, and they've done some re-upping. They've re-upped Tippett, they've re-upped Paling, which is kind of funny. It comes from the Penguins, and he says like his best year of his career playing for the Flyers, and he's like a third line grit guy and penalty killer.
Seems to be the Penguins' problem. They trade people away, or they let people go, and they shine somewhere else.
Right?
What are you going to do?
So, but it's it's interesting. I mean, I think that they're going to. I think that the Flyers will be in the conversation for the playoffs till the end. Will they make it? Won't they make it? I mean, if I had to bet on it, I would bet that they don't make it. But it also wouldn't surprise me if they do make it.
So how you feel about this comment that Steve leaves us here? If they come out flat, they'll be in trouble. I predict a fall to the, what does he mean by WC?
Maybe wild card.
You should probably not be typing while you're driving, Steve. Anyway, I predict a fall to the wild card taken over by Pens, by Pittsburgh or New Jersey. Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. I mean, the thing is that like, where the Flyers are now, I mean, I think they have a decent record. They're probably like, 20. Let's look up their record real quick. I think.
Why don't you do that?
I think they're like,
you do that and I'll do a little jingle.
How about instead of a jingle, why don't you remind people what they're watching?
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea.
Or listening.
You are watching, if you're watching live on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and X, the Philadelphia Sports Porch. And you can subscribe to us on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere, as Schwaber says, you get your friggin' podcasts. Right. And 56 points, says Steve.
Okay.
And of course, we drop the podcast right after the show so you can catch up.
So here's what you're looking at. You're looking at the Flyers are 25, 19, and 6. Okay.
Which Steve would say is actually 25 and 25.
Right.
Because he doesn't like the whole loser point.
Right. Well, those are not loser points. Those are
ties.
You get a point for a tie, or you get 2 points for the win.
Right.
Okay. But the general gist of it's like this. They're 25 and 19. Let's just say there's 6 games over 500. Okay. So what that really means is that, the way I kind of look at it is like, if you're 10 games over 500, you're good. If you're 5 games over 500, you're teetering.
Right.
And if you're 500, you suck.
Right.
So, the Flyers are the Flyers are teetering.
If you're under 500, do you really suck?
Right. Let's take a look at who's behind them. The Islanders 20 and 17.
Yeah, and they just brought in Patrick Waugh.
Yeah, they're 3 games over 500. The Penguins are 22 and 17. They're 5 games over 500. The New Jersey Devils are 24 and 20. They're 4 games over 500. I mean, they're basically all in the same mix. They're all teetering, borderline not good teams.
Right.
You know what I mean? Some of those teams will get to 10 games above 500 and become decent teams.
Right.
But some of them won't. So, but the whole point is that I don't think you can just look at the Islanders and the New Jersey Devils were in the playoffs last year, so they'll eventually get there. Right. And the bottom line is, there's between 45 and 50 games played, and these teams are where they are. They're not winning very much.
Well, we'll have to see where they end up after this fiasco with Carter Hart. That kind of puts it, if they can put it behind them and continue their winning ways. Page 3, flipping the page.
Let's flip it.
Let's flip it to the Phillies. Because pitchers and catchers report next week, right?
Pitchers and catchers report, and I will let you know momentarily if we have any breaking news, because you never know, because you just never know.
Well, wasn't there some sort of rumor being circulated here about the possibility of Cody Bellinger? becoming a member. I mean, that doesn't it seem like it's a little past time for that to happen?
Well, the bottom line
is he a free agent?
Yeah, as long as he's not signed,
he's not past time. He hasn't signed, right?
Yeah. So, some of these guys are like Scott Boras clients.
Yeah.
And so they actually wait until everybody's already reported until they sign. They're just trying to kind of hang on and, say, we're not going to settle, that kind of thing.
Right.
Like Cody Bellinger's a guy who's probably looking to make $300 million. He's probably only going to make $200 million.
Well, and I saw Bobby Witt Jr. Bobby Witt Jr. just re-signed with the Royals, 11 years, $289 million.
Right.
I mean, this is astronomical.
I mean, the baseball.
He's a good player, but he's not a superstar.
Yeah, and baseball's ridiculous that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and the Phillies, I mean, look, the Phillies already have, Bryce Harper's a 10-year guy. So's Trey Turner. Now, Bryce is about 5 years in, but still, and they got to re-sign Wheeler to a big deal.
Yeah.
So, but, anyway, I think it was Bob Nightingale, big-time reporter, who put out that some executives around the league think that the Phillies might be closing in either on a Cody Bellinger or on Jordan Montgomery, the starting pitcher of the Texas Rangers.
Who do you want more if you were to choose? If you knew you were going to get one of them, which one do you want more?
I got to say, I'll go Jordan Montgomery.
Yeah, I'm the opposite. I'd take Cody Bellinger.
Well, Cody Bellinger, yeah. The only thing about him is he does have that injury history.
Yeah.
And he finally got back to being a great ball player last year.
Yep.
But here's the other part of it. All the Phillies' good bats are left-handed.
Okay.
So they kind of more need some power from the other side.
Right.
And so I would rather go with Jordan Montgomery, really shore up the pitching staff, have a real strong 1, 2, 3, put Ranger back in the 4 spot.
Right.
And then with that, you pick up that right-handed power bat at the trade deadline.
Right. Right.
That's just my thinking. But hey, look, I'll be happy if either guy's signed.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not like you can, the potential there is good all the way around.
Right. And they just might not sign anybody,
That's true.
I mean, if you really think about it, I mean, the last 2 years, essentially what they've had a team that's been good enough to win the World Series. They just haven't.
Yeah.
That's really what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, the reality is that, and sometimes this happens when you're dealing with hitting, when you're dealing with lineups. If the bats go cold, the bats go cold.
Yeah.
And they were up 2-1 on Houston and the bats went cold.
Yeah.
And then they were up, 3-2 on Arizona and the bats went cold.
Yeah. Yeah. That was surprising.
Yeah. So, but the bottom line is like, you can't tell me that you're going to do better than the lineup that they're putting out there.
Yeah.
Maybe in 1 or 2 spots, but
right.
But it's at the same time, it's there's also something to the idea of a team playing together and playing with camaraderie and getting better at playing with each other. All those little things like the double play connection from Turner to Stott, and,
right?
All those little things kind of matter. And if you keep just trying to add superstar after superstar, something like think about like the Dodgers. I mean, when's the last time they won? I think they won during like the COVID season, like a short season.
I think more about the Angels.
Yeah,
they add superstar after superstar and can't win anything.
Right. Oh, and that's the other thing, that there's also they're believing a high likelihood that Mike Trout is going to be available at the trade deadline this year. Because without Ohtani, they're going to be worse than they were. And Trout's kind of getting up there. He's had these injuries and he's got a huge deal. So to unload him just makes sense.
Yeah. I wonder where he'll go. That'll be real interesting.
And the other thing about Trout, I don't know if you know, but he's an Eagle season ticket holder. and he's from Philadelphia, and he loves.
Yeah, I know he's from Philly.
So and he and Harper are buddies.
Okay, well,
so we don't
want to predict anything, but you never know.
Could you imagine that?
You never know.
Trout in the lineup.
I could imagine, as long as he stays healthy.
Yeah,
they'd be unbeatable.
Yeah,
they really would.
You would think so.
He's getting up there though.
He is. I mean, he's kind of like baseball's version of Embiid.
Yeah,
he gets hurt every year. Plays half a year.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. You know.
All right. Well, we'll keep our eyes on that because baseball season is right around the corner, and I'm sure on the Philly Sports Porch YouTube channel we'll be seeing plenty of those little snippets from the Grand Schwabini, updating you on the Phillies. And remember, we drop the podcast tonight right after the show, like we do every Monday on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you get your friggin' podcast.
Anywhere.
Let's turn the page here. Let's talk Eagles. I do want to say something for page 4. I did just see on ESPN. Now, you might have known this already. I don't know. But the Eagles in week 1 are hosting the inaugural NFL game in Brazil.
Are they really?
I just saw it. I'll keep my eyes on the monitor there.
That sounds horrible to me.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Oh, here it is. Here it is. Eagles will open 2024 season in Brazil.
Yeah. There you go.
They don't say who they're playing though.
Sorry, they must have an extra home game because they're considered
right. That's probably their ninth home game.
Yeah. So So I'm thinking maybe. I mean, I don't know. It's Brazil.
Yeah.
Sure. They've never played a football game in Brazil, have they?
Nope.
I don't think so.
I know the Eagles are undefeated in Brazil. Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
But they'll be going up against an undefeated team.
I'm going to take you off the Eagles real quick.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the Commanders' prospects now? We're staying in the NFC East.
Sure.
Now that Dan Quinn is the head coach, and they just announced Steve Belichick, Bill Belichick's son, is the defensive coordinator. And the offensive coordinator is most likely going to be Cliff Kingsbury. So they've got the number 2 pick in the draft. Kingsbury was Caleb Williams' coach. Right. All indications are
does Caleb Williams get past 1?
Yeah. Well, I mean, backdoor dealing, you never know. Right. I mean, it looks to me.
Right.
But aside from the draft thing, which is down the road a bit, how do you feel that changes? You got new ownership, you got new head coach, new coordinators in Washington. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think it's good. I mean, it's good for the Commanders.
Well, obviously. Yes.
But I will say I was a little surprised in the choice of Dan Quinn as the head coach. To me, I mean, look, he's a very good defensive coordinator. I sort of look at him as, now look, he did get his team to a Super Bowl.
Yes.
Unfortunately, his team had the worst collapse in Super Bowl history.
And they played Brady.
Although that's more, Kyle Shanahan than anybody else.
Right.
But at the same time, I don't know, when you sort of get in that boat, I sort of put you into that pocket of, great coordinator, not a great head coach.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So I was a little surprised that he was named head coach. So that I'm unsure of.
Yeah.
I do like Cliff Kingsbury as an offensive coordinator. I think he's, kind of like, an up and coming kind of young mind that's got a lot of creativity to bring to the table.
He didn't have a lot of luck in Arizona, although he did have luck the first 2 years.
Well, he did the first 2 years, now if they could reunite him with, Caleb, that's a home run right there.
I was even thinking maybe there's going to be a play for Kyler Murray.
I don't think so.
I mean, I know he just signed a big deal, but
yeah, I don't think so. I think that they will try to get Caleb. I mean, even though they don't have the number 1 spot, they could trade up with the Bears to get the number 1 spot.
Yeah, well, and that's the big thing is like, do the Bears really want to give up on Justin Fields? Everybody says they do, but do they?
Yeah, I mean, I would if I were them.
I don't know. We'll probably would too. But how many number 1 picks are you going to burn? I mean, it just seems to me like that's a situation in which they're going to burn another number 1 pick.
We'll see. But I mean, I think any change is good for the Commanders, but I don't really look at them as a let's say, as a threat next year.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And if anything, the one thing that I would say, even though I like Cliff Kingsbury, I also kind of wonder, like, why wouldn't you keep Eric Bieniemy as your offense coordinator? Because he's pretty good.
Well,
I mean, it's not his fault that Sam Howell started throwing interceptions all over the place.
No, that's true. And Howell was, for the first half of the season, arguably the number one passer,
right.
but the thing about that is that and I heard this on sports radio a couple days ago, and I thought it was pretty prescient. They said, look where the Chiefs are again.
Mm-hmm.
So was that really Eric Bieniemy?
Well, yeah, because the offense was really good last year and they stink this year.
Well, I don't think they stink. They're just not as good as they were, and you can't be at the top all the time. The point they were making,
it's the defense.
Well, also
and a great quarterback who doesn't make mistakes.
The point they were making though is that Andy Reid is really the offense in that thing. And I know you're a jaded Eagles fan.
Well,
Andy Reid couldn't do it for you.
No. Look, here's the bottom line. Andy Reid can't do it for anybody except Patrick Mahomes. Bill Belichick can't do it for anybody except Tom Brady.
That's true.
Remember, I told you, when Andy Reid went to the Chiefs, the first 4 years, he had Alex Smith.
Yeah.
And with Alex Smith, he went 1-4 in the playoffs.
Yeah.
It's the same coach that's doing the same things now.
True.
He's just got a way better player.
But the one thing I will give Andy Reid is that he recognized that. He recognized he wasn't going to get any further.
Of course.
So I guess from the commander's perspective, first of all, Bieniemy was a previous regime hire.
Right.
So he's not going to be there.
Yeah, I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah. So I don't see a threat to the Eagles from them.
But going back to the Eagles.
Yeah, which is the more important team.
Well, I think the biggest thing that you want to see from the Eagles is, can we get Jalen Hurts back to 2022 Jalen Hurts?
Yeah.
Now the thing that I always find funny, granted, Jalen Hurts was in the Pro Bowl because Brock Purdy and Patrick Mahomes are in the Super Bowl. So
and the Pro Bowl doesn't mean anything anymore anyway.
Well, but that's beside the fact. I mean, the bottom line is it's like, people worry about Jalen Hurts. Meanwhile, he's in the Pro Bowl on a bad year.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, so that's a good point.
So it's kind of like, let's not get ridiculous about it here.
Yeah.
But he did make more mistakes than he usually does, throwing more interceptions than he ever has before. And sounds like he and AJ Brown went rogue on the coaching staff, which didn't equate to much success. So I do really like bringing in Kellen Moore. And what I like even more,
that's key right there.
And what I like even more is they brought in Kellen Moore's quarterbacks coach from the Chargers,
right?
Who's worked with Herbert, and prior to Herbert, worked with Dak Prescott,
right?
So he's supposed to be like a really well respected quarterback coach,
right?
So I think with the two of them working together with Jalen, I think that they can get Jalen playing at a higher clip next year, and so that excites me.
I think that. Sorry about that. I think that the reason that Jalen Hurts had, not as good a year as the Super Bowl year, is because the defense was not performing well. So you're going to press. You're going to push it. You're going to take more risks. You're going to say, I need to get another big touchdown pass in here because the defense. I don't know if they're going to be able to hold these guys. So I don't think Jalen Hurts had a. I'm going to use a term lightly, but I don't think he had a bad year at all. I think he actually had a great year, but it was just overshadowed by the fact that the defense fell apart. And at the end of the year, they collapsed. They won one out of their last 6 games.
Yeah.
So that's gonna cause you've got the leader of the team is the quarterback, the leader of the offense. That's gonna cause anybody to say, okay, now I have to carry this team on my shoulders, and that's hard to do.
Yeah, and I also think he was playing hurt.
That's possible.
And when you play hurt, when he plays hurt, it takes the running element of his game out a little bit. And so if the defense doesn't have to prepare for that, and if you notice, I think what they did this year is they went a little too far with it.
Yeah.
What they would do is they would do some of those calls, some of those, I'm drawing a blank on it. What do you call that when you do the quarterback runs? The
RPO,
run option.
the
run pass option. Right. And so when he would choose the run pass option to himself, he would go 2 yards, and then if somebody was close, he would slide.
Right.
And it's like, no, if you're going to run, you got to choose to run.
Yeah, run.
You know what I mean? So like they went a little too far with it, and I think that they'll fix that for next year.
Yeah. Well, we of course have the Super Bowl coming up this week. That's the big game, and after that, then it's racing towards the combine and all the draft hype and all that stuff.
And I love that stuff. I mean, I'm already all over the mock drafts. I've already got corners and linebackers that I'm interested in.
All right.
So,
we'll address that in 2 weeks after we talk about the Super Bowl next week. So,
all right,
Schwaber. That's a wrap. Listen, man, I want to thank everybody for watching the Sports Porch Philadelphia. Of course, we love when you're here. We love when you drop comments. We also love when you subscribe to the podcast, the Sports Porch Philadelphia, on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or
anywhere you get your freaking podcast.
Much better, much better. And we drop the show right after the show right here. Please subscribe to it, leave a review, check out the YouTube channel. We just put that up there. The Grand Schwabini will be on a regular basis. And other than that, I just want to say thank you, and we are out.
Thank you.
Goodbye.